to arm the local masses. This is cliquism in a magnified form. 7. Unable to see beyond their limited environment in the Fourth Army, a few comrades believe that no other revolutionary forces exist, hence their extreme addiction to the idea of conserving strength and avoiding action. This is a remnant of opportunism. Some comrades, disregarding the subjective and objective conditions, suffer from the malady of revolutionary impetuosity. They will not take pains to do minute and detailed work among the masses, but, riddled with illusions, want to only do big things. This is a remnant of putschism. Footnote. For a brief period after the defeat of the revolution in 1927, a left putschist tendency arose in the Communist Party. Regarding the Chinese Revolution as a permanent revolution, and the revolutionary situation in China as a
Fucking
permanent
trots.
upsurge, the putschist comrades refused to organize an orderly retreat and, adopting the methods of commandism and relying only on a small number of party members and a small section of the masses, erroneously attempted to stage a series of local uprisings throughout the country, which had no prospect of success. Such putschist activities were widespread at the end of 1927, but gradually subsided in the beginning of 1928, though sentiments in favor of putschism still survived among some comrades. End footnote. The sources of the purely military viewpoint are 1. A low political level. From this flows the failure to recognize the role of political leadership in the army and to recognize that the Red Army and the White Army are fundamentally different. 2. The mentality of mercenaries. Many prisoners captured in the past battles have joined the Red Army, and such elements bring with them a markedly mercenary outlook, thereby providing a basis in the lower ranks for the purely military viewpoint. 3. From the two preceding causes there arises a third, overconfidence in military strength and absence of confidence in the strength of the masses of the people. 4. The party's failure actively to attend to and discuss military work is also a reason for the emergence of the purely military viewpoint among a number of comrades. The methods of correction are as follows. 1. Raise the political level in the party by means of education. Destroy the theoretical roots of the purely military viewpoint, and be clear on the fundamental difference between the Red Army and the White Army. At the same time, eliminate the remnants of opportunism and putschism and break down the selfish departmentalism of the Fourth Army. 2. Intensify the political training of officers and men, and especially the education of ex-prisoners. At the same time, as far as possible, let the local government select workers and peasants experienced in struggle to join the Red Army, thus organizationally weakening or even eradicating the purely military viewpoint. 3. Arouse the local party organizations to criticize the party organizations in the Red Army and the organs of mass political power to criticize the Red Army itself.
Yeah, we could take over New
The
Hampshire.
party organizations and the officers and men of the Red Army. 4. The party must actively attend to and discuss military work. All the work must be discussed and decided upon by the party before being carried out by the rank and file. 5. Draw up Red Army rules and regulations that clearly define its tasks, the relationship between its military and its political apparatus, the relationship between the Red Army
If you're
and
gonna
the
just
masses of the people,
willy-nilly
the powers
design
and
mods,
functions
you
of
should at
service
least
committees and their relationship
have the
with
common
military and
fucking
political
courtesy to not
organizations.
just spam highways early game.
On ultra-democracy.
There we go.
Since
Now
the
we're
Fourth
cooking.
Army of the Red Army accepted the directives of the Central Committee, there has been a great decrease in the manifestations of ultra-democracy. Have already been eliminated. In other words, ultra-democracy is still deep-rooted in the minds of many comrades. Witness the various expressions of reluctance to carry out party decisions. The methods of correction are as follows. 1. In the sphere of theory, destroy the roots of ultra-democracy. First, it should be pointed out that the danger of ultra-democracy lies in the fact that it damages or even completely wrecks the party organization, and weakens or even completely undermines the party's fighting capacity, rendering the party incapable of fulfilling its fighting tasks, and thereby causing the defeat of the revolution. Next, it should be pointed out that the source of ultra-democracy consists of the petty bourgeoisie's individualistic aversion to discipline. When this characteristic is brought into the party, it develops into ultra-democratic ideas politically and organizationally. These ideas are utterly incompatible with the fighting tasks of the proletariat. 2. In the sphere of organization, ensure democracy under centralized guidance. It should be done on the following lines. 1. The leading bodies of the party must give a correct line of guidance and find solutions when problems arise, in order to establish themselves as centers of leadership. 2. The higher bodies must be familiar with the life of the masses and with the situation in the lower bodies so as to have an objective basis for correct guidance. 3. No party organization at any level should make casual decisions in solving problems. Once a decision is reached, it must be firmly carried out. 4. All decisions of any importance made by the party's higher bodies must be promptly transmitted to the lower bodies in the party rank and file. The method is to call meetings of activist or general membership meetings of the party branches or even of the columns when circumstances permit, and to assign people to make reports at such meetings. Footnote. In the guerrilla system of organization, a column corresponded to a division in the regular army, with a complement much more flexible and usually much smaller than that of a regular division. End footnote. 5. The lower bodies of the party and the party rank and file must discuss the higher bodies' directives in detail in order to understand their meaning thoroughly and decide on the methods of carrying them out. On the disregard of organizational discipline. Disregard of organizational discipline in the party organization in the Fourth Army manifests itself as follows. A. Failure of the minority to submit to the majority. For example, when a minority finds its motion voted down, it does not sincerely carry out the party decisions. The methods of correction are as follows. 1. At meetings, all participants should be encouraged to voice their opinions as fully as possible. The rights and wrongs in any controversy should be clarified without compromise or glossing over. In order to reach a clear-cut conclusion, what cannot be settled at one meeting should be discussed at another, provided there is no interference with the work. 2. One requirement of party discipline is that the minority should submit to the majority. If the view of the minority has been rejected, it must support the decision passed by the majority. If necessary, it can bring up the matter for reconsideration at the next meeting, but apart from that, it must not act against the decision in any way. B. Criticism made without regard to organizational discipline. 1. Inter-party criticism is a weapon for strengthening the party organization and increasing its fighting capacity. In the party organization of the Red Army, however, criticism is not always of this character and sometimes turns into personal attack. As a result, it damages the party organization as well as individuals. This is a manifestation of petty bourgeois individualism. The method of correction is to help party members understand that the purpose of criticism is to increase the party's fighting capacity in order to achieve victory in the class struggle, and that it should not be used as a means of personal attack. 2. Many party members make their criticisms not inside, but outside the party.
Overdrive.
The reason is that the general membership has not yet grasped the importance.
I think this is the first time I played a game besides Arma in months.
And sees no difference between criticism inside and outside the organization. The method of correction is to educate party members so that they understand the importance of party organization and make their criticisms of party committees or comrades at party meetings. On absolute equalitarianism. Absolute equalitarianism became quite serious in the Red Army at one time. Here are some examples. On the matter of allowances to wounded soldiers, there were objections to differentiating between light and serious cases, and the demand was raised for equal allowances for all. When officers rode on horseback, it was regarded not as something necessary for performing their duties, but as a sign of inequality. Absolutely equal distribution of supplies was demanded, and there was objection to somewhat larger allotments in special cases. In the hauling of rice, the demand was made that all should carry the same load on their backs, irrespective of age or physical condition. Equality was demanded in the allotment of billets, and the headquarters would be abused for occupying larger rooms. Equality was demanded in the assignment of fatigue duties, and there was unwillingness to do a little more than the next man. It even went so far that when there were 2 wounded men but only 1 stretcher, neither could be carried away because each refused to yield priority to the other. Absolute equalitarianism, as shown in these examples, is still very serious among officers and soldiers of the Red Army. Absolute equalitarianism, like ultrademocracy in political matters, is the product of a handicraft and small peasant economy, the only difference being that one manifests itself in material affairs, while the other manifests itself in political affairs. The method of correction. We should point out that, before the abolition of capitalism, absolute equalitarianism is a mere illusion of peasants and small proprietors, and that even under socialism there can be no absolute equality, for material things will then be distributed on the principle from each according to his ability to each according to his work, as well as on that of meeting the needs of the work. The distribution of material things in the Red Army must be more or less equal, as in the case of equal pay for officers and men, because this is required by the present circumstances of the struggle. But absolute equalitarianism beyond reason must be opposed because it is not required by the struggle. On the contrary, it hinders the struggle. On subjectivism. Subjectivism exists to a serious degree among some party members, causing great harm to the analysis of the political situation and the guidance of the work. The reason is that subjective analysis of a political situation and subjective guidance of work inevitably result either in opportunism or in putschism. As for subjective criticism, loose and groundless talk, or suspiciousness, such practices inside the party often breed unprincipled disputes and undermine the party organization. Another point that should be mentioned in connection with inter-party criticism is that some comrades ignore the major issues and confine their attention to minor points when they make their criticism. They do not understand that the main task of the criticism is to point out political and organizational mistakes. As to personal shortcomings, unless they are related to political and organizational mistakes, there is no need to be overcritical and to embarrass the comrades concerned. Moreover, once such criticism develops, there is the great danger that the party members will concentrate entirely on minor faults, and everyone will become timid and overcautious and forget the party's political tasks. The main method of correction is to educate party members so that a political and scientific spirit pervades their thinking and their party life. To this end, we must 1. Teach party members to apply the Marxist-Leninist method in analyzing a political situation and appraising the class forces, instead of making a subjective analysis and appraisal. 2. Direct the attention of party members to social and economic investigation and study, so as to determine the tactics of struggle and methods of work, and help comrades to understand that without investigation of actual conditions, they will fall into the pit of fantasy and putschism. And 3. In inter-party criticism, guard against subjectivism, arbitrariness, and the vulgarization of criticism. Statements should be based on facts and criticism should center on politics. On individualism. The tendency towards individualism in the Red Army party organization manifests itself as follows. 1. Retaliation. Some comrades, after being criticized inside the party by a soldier comrade, look for opportunities to retaliate outside the party, and one way is to beat or abuse the comrade in question. They also seek to retaliate within the party. You have criticized me at this meeting, so I'll find some way to pay you back at the next. Such retaliation arises from purely personal considerations to the neglect of the interests of the class and the party as a whole. Its target is not the enemy class, but individuals in our own ranks. It is a corrosive which weakens the organization and its fighting capacity. 2. Small group mentality. Some comrades consider only the interests of their own small group and ignore the general interest. Although on the surface this does not seem to be the pursuit of personal interests, in reality it exemplifies the narrowest individualism and has a strong corrosive and centrifugal effect. Small group mentality used to be rife in the Red Army, and although there have been some improvements as a result of criticism, there are still remnants and further effort is needed to overcome it. 3. The employee mentality. Some comrades do not understand that the party and the Red Army, of which they are members, are both instruments for carrying out the tasks of revolution.
Like I said, this is the first time I played anything besides Arma in like a month and a half.
Is merely to their individual superiors.
Neglecting my responsibilities and falling prey to the purely military viewpoint.
Revolution is also a manifestation of individualism. It explains why there are not very many activists who work unconditionally for the revolution. Unless it is eliminated, the number of activists will not grow, and the heavy burden of the revolution will remain on the shoulders of a small number of people, much to the detriment of the struggle. 4. Pleasure seeking. In the Red Army, there are also quite a few people whose individualism finds expression in pleasure seeking. They always hope that their unit will march into big cities. They want to go there not to work, but to enjoy themselves. The last thing they want is to work in the red areas where life is hard. 5. Passivity. Some comrades become passive and stop working whenever anything goes against their wishes. This is mainly due to lack of education, though sometimes it is also due to the leadership's improper conduct of affairs, assignment of work, or enforcement of discipline. 6. The desire to leave the Army. The number of people who ask for transfers from the Red Army to local work is on the increase. The reason for this does not lie entirely with the individuals, but also with 1.
I believe this is combat bourgeois thinking in the party. This is a collection of works by Mao on organization and the mass line from Foreign Languages Press.
Primarily to strengthen education so as to rectify individualism ideologically. Next is to conduct affairs, make assignments, and enforce discipline in a proper way. In addition, ways must be found to improve the material life of the Red Army, and every available opportunity must be utilized for rest and rehabilitation in order to improve material conditions. In our educational work, we must explain that in its social origin, individualism is a reflection within the party of petty bourgeois and bourgeois ideas.
Boo.
On the ideology of roving rebel bands.
Yay, fuck yeah, I love roving rebel bands.
In the Red Army because the proportion of vagabond elements is large and because there are great masses of vagabonds in China, especially in the southern provinces. This ideology manifests itself as follows.
Let's build a little
1.
Chinatown.
Some people want to increase our political influence only by means of roving guerrilla actions, but are unwilling to increase it by undertaking the arduous task of building up base areas and establishing...
Can you make people pay zero rent in this game? Unfortunately, no. We cannot crush the power of landlords.
Buying horses and recruiting deserters and accepting mutineers. Rather than the line of expanding the local Red Guards,
You can design like districts or specialized industry areas or create districts, but I don't think you can have like that type of like. It is very tragic. This game was developed by European capitalists.
In the application of these methods, attention was paid to numbers rather than to quality, and people of all sorts were indiscriminately recruited to swell the ranks. End footnote. 3. Some people lack the patience to carry on arduous struggles together with the masses and only want to go to the big cities to eat and drink to their heart's content.
I like eating and drinking to my heart's content.
Of the ideology of roving rebels
after the revolution,
the Red Army in performing its proper tasks. Consequently, its eradication is an important objective in the ideological struggle within the Red Army Party organization. It must be understood that the ways of roving rebels of the Huang Chao or Li Chuang type are not permissible under present-day conditions. Footnote. Huang Chao was the leader of the peasant revolts towards the end of the Tang dynasty. In AD 875, starting from his home district, Caozhou, now Hez County in Shandong, Huang led armed peasants in victorious battles against the imperial forces and styled himself the heaven-storming general. In the course of a decade, he swept over most of the provinces in the Yellow, Yangtze, Huai, and Pearl River valleys.
There's some cotton farming going. We have to have something to the white for the white people that are allowed to live in Intifadaville to do.
The imperial capital of Chang'an and was crowned Emperor of Qi. Internal dissensions and attacks by the non-Han tribal allies of the Tang forces compelled Huang to abandon Chang'an and retreat to his native district, where he committed suicide.
Oh dear.
The 10 Years' War fought by him is one of the most famous peasant wars in Chinese history. Dynastic historians record that all people suffering from heavy taxes and levies rallied to him. But as he merely carried on roving warfare without ever establishing relatively consolidated base areas, his forces were called roving rebel bands. End footnote. The methods of correction are as follows.
Yay, a bookstore.
1. Intensify education, criticize incorrect ideas, and eradicate the ideology of roving rebel bands. 2. Intensify education among the basic sections of the Red Army and among recently recruited captives to counter the vagabond outlook. 3. Draw active workers and peasants experienced in struggle into the ranks of the Red Army so as to change its composition. 4. Create new units of the Red Army from among the masses of militant workers and peasants. On the remnants of Puchism. The party organization in the Red Army has already waged struggles against Puchism, but not yet to a sufficient extent. Therefore, remnants of this ideology still exist in the Red Army. Their manifestations are 1. Blind action regardless of subjective and objective conditions. 2. Inadequate and irresolute application of the party's policies for the cities. 3. Slack military discipline, especially in moments of defeat. 4. Acts of house burning by some units. And 5. The practices of shooting deserters and of inflicting
What do I think of the Emerge Caucus in DSA? I fuck with them.
Social origins,
good comrades, some of which I knew before I even joined DSA.
The methods of correction are as follows.
Really strong on the East Coast. If you're in New York, I highly recommend joining them.
2.
If you don't want to join Liberation Caucus.
Rules, regulations, and policies.
Either way, hang out and roll with the ultras.
Combat liberalism. September 7th, 1937.
My favorite.
For active ideological struggle.
Boo, liberalism.
Ensuring unity within the party and the revolutionary organizations in the interest of our fight. Every communist and revolutionary should take up this weapon. But liberalism rejects ideological struggle and stands for unprincipled peace, thus giving rise to a decadent, philistine
Boo, unprincipled peace. Yucky.
Degeneration in certain units and individuals in the party and the revolutionary organizations. Liberalism manifests itself in various ways. To let
like in DS, like joining DSA.
When a person has really gone wrong and refrain from principled argument because
I'm joking, don't grievance me.
A schoolmate, a close friend, a loved one, an old colleague, or old subordinate. Or to touch on the matter lightly instead of going into it thoroughly, so as to keep on good terms. The result is that both the organization and the individual are harmed. This is one type of liberalism. To indulge in irresponsible criticism in private instead of actively putting forward one's suggestions to the organization. To say nothing to people to their faces but to gossip behind their backs.
Boo.
To say nothing in a meeting but to gossip afterwards.
Yucky.
To show no regard at all for the principles of collective life, but to follow one's own inclination. This is a second type. To let things drift if they do not affect one personally, to say as little as possible while knowing perfectly well what is wrong, to be worldly wise and play safe, and seek only to avoid blame. This is a third type. Not to obey
Chinatown
orders
going.
Pride of place, to one's own opinions.
I've heard of John Elmer. I don't necessarily follow his reports, so I'm pretty familiar with him.
To indulge in personal attacks, pick quarrels, vent personal spite, or seek revenge instead of entering into an argument and struggling against incorrect views for the sake of unity or progress, or getting the work done properly, this is a fifth type. To hear incorrect views without rebutting them, and even to hear counter-revolutionary remarks without reporting them, but instead to take them calmly as if nothing had happened, this is a sixth type. To be among the masses and fail to conduct propaganda and agitation, or to speak at meetings or conduct investigations and inquiries among them, and to instead be indifferent to them and show no concern for the well-being, forgetting that one is a communist and behaving as if one were an ordinary non-communist, this is a seventh type. To see someone harming the interests of the masses and yet not feel indignant, or dissuade or stop him or reason with him, but to allow him to continue, this is an eighth type. To work half-heartedly without a definite plan or direction, to work perfunctorily, and muddle along, so long as one remains a monk, one goes on tolling the bell, this is a ninth type. To regard oneself as having rendered great service to the revolution, to pride oneself on being a veteran, to disdain minor assignments while being quite unequal to major tasks, to be slipshod in work and slack in study, this is a 10th type. To be aware of one's own mistakes and yet make no attempt to correct them, taking a liberal attitude towards oneself, this is an 11th type. We could name more, but these 11 are the principal types. They are all manifestations of liberalism. Liberalism is extremely harmful in a revolutionary collective. It is a corrosive which eats away unity, undermines cohesion, causes apathy, and creates dissension. It robs the revolutionary ranks of compact organization and strict discipline, prevents policies from being carried through, and alienates the party organizations from the masses which the party leads. It is an extremely bad tendency. Liberalism stems from petty bourgeois selfishness. It places personal interests first and the interests of the revolution second, and this gives rise to ideological, political, and organizational liberalism. People who are liberals look upon the principles of Marxism as abstract dogma. They approve of Marxism, but are not prepared to practice it or to practice it in full. They are not prepared to replace their liberalism by Marxism. These people have their Marxism, but they have their liberalism as well. They talk Marxism but practice liberalism. They apply Marxism to others but liberalism to themselves. They keep both kinds of goods in stock and find a use for each. This is how the minds of certain people work. Liberalism is a manifestation of opportunism and conflicts fundamentally with Marxism. It is negative and objectively has the effect of helping the enemy. That is why the enemy welcomes its preservation in our midst. Such being its nature, there should be no place for it in the ranks of the revolution. We must use Marxism, which is positive in spirit, to overcome liberalism, which is negative. A communist should have largeness of mind, and he should be staunch and active, looking upon
a communist should have a very large head,
his very life, and subordinating his personal interests to those of the revolution. Always and everywhere he should adhere to principle, and wage a tireless struggle against all incorrect ideas and actions, so as to consolidate the collective life of the party and strengthen the ties between the party and the masses. He should be more concerned about the party and the masses than about any private person, and more concerned about others than about himself. Only thus can he be considered a communist. All loyal, honest, active, and upright communists must unite to oppose the liberal tendencies shown by certain people among us, and set them on the right path. This is one of the tasks on our ideological front. Reform our study. May 1941. Footnote. Mao Zedong made this report to a cadres meeting in Yan'an. The report and the two articles rectify the party's style of work and oppose stereotyped party writing are Comrade Mao Zedong's basic works on the rectification movement. In these, he summed up, on the ideological plane, past differences in the party over the party line, and analyzed the petty bourgeois ideology and style which, masquerading as Marxism-Leninism, were prevalent in the party, and which chiefly manifested themselves in subjectivist and sectarian tendencies, their form of expression being stereotyped party writing. Mao Zedong called for a party-wide movement of Marxist-Leninist education to rectify style of work in accordance with the ideological principles of Marxism-Leninism. His call very quickly led to a great debate between proletarian and petty bourgeois ideology inside and outside the party. This consolidated the position of proletarian ideology inside and outside the party, enabled the broad ranks of cadres to take a great step forward ideologically, and the party to achieve unprecedented unity. End footnote. I propose that we should reform the method and the system of study throughout the party. The reasons are as follows. 1. The 20 years of the Communist Party of China have been 20 years in which the universal truth of Marxism-Leninism has become more and more integrated with the concrete practice of the Chinese Revolution.
Oops.
If we recall how superficial and meager our understanding of Marxism-Leninism and of the Chinese Revolution was during our party's infancy, we can see how much deeper and richer it is now. For 100 years, the finest sons and daughters of the disaster-ridden Chinese nation fought and sacrificed their lives, one stepping into the breach as another fell, in quest of the truth that would save the country and the people. This moves us to Song and Tears. But it was only after World War I and the October Revolution in Russia that we found Marxism-Leninism, the best of truths,
Boss makes a dollar, I make a dime. That's why I watch city building streamers on company time.
And organizer in the wielding of this weapon. As
Don't
soon
get
as it was
caught.
linked with the concrete practice of the Chinese Revolution, the universal truth of Marxism-Leninism gave an entirely new complexion to the Chinese Revolution. Since the outbreak of the War of Resistance against Japan, our party, basing itself on the universal truth of Marxism-Leninism, has taken a further step in its study of the concrete practice of this war and in its study of China and the world today, and has also made a beginning in the study of Chinese history. These are all very good signs. 2. However, we still have shortcomings and very big ones too. Unless we correct these shortcomings, we shall not, in my opinion, be able to take another step forward in our work and in our great cause of integrating the universal truth of Marxism-Leninism with the concrete practice of the Chinese Revolution. First, take the study of current conditions. We have achieved some success in our study of present domestic and international conditions. But for such a large political party as ours, the material we have collected is fragmentary, and our research work unsystematic on each and every aspect of these subjects, whether it be the political, military, economic, or cultural aspect. Generally speaking, in the last 20 years we have not done systematic and thorough work in collecting and studying material on these aspects, and we are lacking in a climate of investigation and study of objective reality. To behave like a blindfolded man catching sparrows, or a blind man groping for
What is
fish,
it with Mao and
to be
sparrows?
careless, to indulge in verbiage, to rest content.
They are
with a
nasty
smattering
little
of knowledge.
shits.
Such is the extremely
You didn't have to
bad
try to
style
kill
that
them all,
still
though.
exists among many comrades in our party, a style utterly opposed to the fundamental spirit of Marxism-Leninism. Marx, Engels, Lenin, and Stalin have taught us that it is necessary to study conditions conscientiously and to proceed from objective reality and not from subjective wishes, but many of our comrades act in direct violation of this truth. Second, take the study of history. Although a few party members and sympathizers have undertaken this work, it has not been done in an organized way. Many party members are still in a fog about Chinese history, whether of the last 100 years or of ancient times. There are many Marxist-Leninist scholars who cannot open their mouths without citing ancient Greece, but as for their own ancestors, sorry, they have been forgotten. There is no climate of serious study, either of current conditions or of past history. Third, take the study of international revolutionary experience, the study of the universal truth of Marxism-Leninism. Many comrades seem to study Marxism-Leninism, not to meet the needs of revolutionary practice, but purely for the sake of study. Consequently, though they read, they cannot digest. They can only cite odd quotations from Marx, Engels, Lenin, and Stalin in a one-sided manner, but are unable to apply the stand, viewpoint, and method of Marx, Engels, Lenin, and Stalin to the concrete study of China's present conditions and her history, or to the concrete analysis and solution of the problems of the Chinese Revolution. Such an attitude towards Marxism-Leninism does a great deal of harm, particularly among cadres of the middle and higher ranks. The three aspects I have just mentioned, neglect of the study of current conditions, neglect of the study of history, and neglect of the application of Marxism-Leninism, all constitute an extremely bad style of work. Its spread has harmed many of our comrades. There are indeed many comrades in our ranks who have been led astray by this style of work. Unwilling to carry on systematic and thorough investigation and study of the specific conditions inside and outside the country, the province, county, or district, they issue orders on no other basis than their scanty knowledge and, it must be so because it seems so to me. Does not this subjectivist style still exist among a great many comrades? There are some who are proud instead of ashamed of knowing nothing or very little of our own history. What is particularly significant is that very few really know the history of the Communist Party of China and the history of China in the 100 years since the Opium War. Hardly anyone has seriously taken up the study of the economic, political, military, and cultural history of the last 100 years. Ignorant of their own country, some people can only relate tales of ancient Greece and other foreign lands, and even this knowledge is quite pathetic, consisting of odds and ends from old foreign books. For several decades, many of the returned students from abroad have suffered from this malady. Coming home from Europe, America, or Japan, they can only parrot things foreign. They become gramophones and forget their duty to understand and create new things. This malady has also infected the Communist Party. Although we are studying Marxism, the way many of our people study it runs directly counter to Marxism.
Like diversity of
That is to
architecture.
say, they violate the fundamental principle earnestly enjoined on us by Marx, Engels, Lenin, and Stalin, the unity of theory and practice. Having violated this principle, they invent an opposite principle of their own, the separation of theory from practice. In the schools and in the education of cadres at work, teachers of philosophy do not guide students to the logic of the Chinese Revolution. Teachers of economics do not guide them to study the characteristics of the Chinese economy. Teachers of political science do not guide them to study the tactics of the Chinese Revolution. Teachers of military science do not guide them to study the strategy and tactics adapted to China's special features, and so on and so forth. Consequently, error is disseminated, doing people great harm. A person does not know how to apply in Fujian what he has learned in Yunnan. Footnote: Fujian County is about 70 kilometers south of Yunnan. End footnote. Professors of economics cannot explain the relationship between the border region currency and the Guomindang currency, so naturally the students cannot explain it either. Footnote: The border region currency consisted of the currency notes issued by the Bank of the Shanxi, Gansu, Ningxia border region government. The Guomindang currency was the paper currency issued by the four big Guomindang bureaucrat capitalist banks from 1935 onwards, with British and US imperialist support. Mao Zedong was referring to the fluctuations in the rates of exchange between these two currencies. End footnote. Thus, a perverse mentality has been created among many students. Instead of showing an interest in China's problems and taking the party's directives seriously, they give all their hearts to the supposedly eternal and immutable dogmas learned from their teachers. Of course, what I have just said refers to the worst type in our party, and I am not saying that it is the general case. However, people of this type do exist. What is more, there are quite a few of them, and they cause a great deal of harm. This matter should not be treated lightly. 3. In order to explain this idea further, I should like to contrast two opposite attitudes. First, there is the subjectivist attitude. With this attitude, a person does not make a systematic and thorough study of the environment, but works by sheer subjective enthusiasm and has a blurred picture of the face of China today. With this attitude, he chops up history, knows only ancient Greece but not China, and is in a fog about the China of yesterday.
I really hated ancient Greece.
With this attitude, a person studies Marxist-Leninist theory in the abstract and without any aim. He goes to Marx, Engels, Lenin, and Stalin not to seek the stand, viewpoint, and method with which to solve the theoretical and tactical problems of the Chinese Revolution, but to study theory purely for theory's sake. He does not shoot the arrow at the target, but shoots at random. Marx, Engels, Lenin, and Stalin have taught us that we should proceed from objective realities and that we should derive laws from them to serve as our guide to action. For this purpose, we should, as Marx said, appropriate the material in detail and subject it to scientific analysis and synthesis. Footnote: See Karl Marx afterward to the second German edition of Capital, in which he wrote, "The latter, the method of inquiry, has to appropriate the material in detail, to analyze its different forms of development, to trace out their interconnection. Only after this work is done can the actual movement be adequately described." Karl Marx, Capital, Volume 1. End footnote. Many of our people do not act in this way, but do the opposite. A good number of them are doing research work, but have no interest in studying either the China of today or the China of yesterday, and confine their interest to the study of empty theories divorced from reality. Many others are doing practical work, but they too pay no attention to the study of objective conditions, often rely on sheer enthusiasm, and substitute their personal feelings for policy. Both kinds of people, relying on the subjective, ignore the existence of objective realities. When making speeches, they indulge in a long string of headings, A, B, C, D, 1, 2, 3, 4, and when writing articles, they turn out a lot of verbiage. They have no intention of seeking truth from facts, but only a desire to curry favor by claptrap. They are flashy without substance, brittle without solidity. They are always right, they are number one authority under heaven, imperial envoys who rush everywhere. Such is the style of work of some comrades in our ranks. To govern one's own conduct by this style is to harm oneself, to teach it to others is to harm others, and to use it to direct the revolution is to harm the revolution. To sum up, this subjectivist method, which is contrary to science and Marxism-Leninism, is a formidable enemy of the Communist Party, the working class, the people and nation. It is a manifestation of impurity in party spirit. A formidable enemy stands before us, and we must overthrow him. Only when subjectivism is overthrown can the truth of Marxism-Leninism prevail. Can party spirit be strengthened? Can the revolution be victorious? We must assert that the absence of a scientific attitude, that is, the absence of Marxist-Leninist approach of uniting theory and practice, means that party spirit is either absent or deficient. There is a couplet which portrays this type of person. It runs, "The reed growing on the wall, top-heavy, thin-stemmed, and shallow of root. The bamboo shoot in the hills, sharp-tongued, thick-skinned, and hollow inside. Is this not an apt description of those who do not have a scientific attitude, who can only recite words and phrases from the works of Marx, Engels, Lenin, and Stalin, and who enjoy a reputation unwarranted by any real learning? If anyone really wishes to cure himself of this malady, I advise him to commit this couplet to memory, or to show still more courage and paste it on the wall of his room. Marxism-Leninism is a science, and science means honest, solid knowledge. There is no room for playing tricks. Let us, then, be honest. Second, there is the Marxist-Leninist attitude. With this attitude, a person applies the theory and method of Marxism-Leninism to the systematic and thorough investigations to integrate Marxist-Leninist theory with the actual movement of the Chinese Revolution, and to seek from this theory the stand, viewpoint, and method with which to solve the theoretical and tactical problems of the Chinese Revolution. Such an attitude is one of shooting the arrow at the target. The target is the Chinese Revolution. The arrow is Marxism-Leninism. We Chinese communists have been seeking this arrow because we want to hit the target of the Chinese Revolution and of the Revolution of the East. To take such an attitude is to seek truth from facts. Facts are all the things that exist objectively. Truth means their internal relations, that is, the laws governing them, and to seek means to study. We should proceed from the actual conditions inside and outside the country, the province, county, or district, and derive from them, as our guide to action, laws that are inherent in them and not imaginary. That is, we should find the internal relations of the events occurring around us. And in order to do that, we must rely not on subjective imagination, not on momentary enthusiasm, not on lifeless books, but on facts that exist objectively. We must appropriate the material in detail and, guided by the general principles of Marxism-Leninism, draw correct conclusions from it. Such conclusions are not mere lists of phenomena in A, B, C, D order, or writings full of platitudes, but are scientific conclusions. Such an attitude is one of seeking truth from facts and not of currying favor by claptrap. It is the manifestation of party spirit, the Marxist-Leninist style of uniting theory and practice. It is the attitude every Communist Party member should have at the very least. He who adopts this attitude will be neither top-heavy, thin-stemmed, and shallow of root, nor sharp-tongued, thick-skinned, and hollow inside. 4. In accordance with the above views, I would like to make the following proposals. 1. We should place before the whole party the task of making a systematic and thorough study of the situation around us. On the basis of the theory and method of Marxism-Leninism, we should make a detailed investigation and study of developments in the economic, financial, political, military, cultural, and party activities of our enemies, our friends, and ourselves, and then draw the proper and necessary conclusions. To this end, we should direct our comrades' attention to the investigation and study of these practical matters. We should get our comrades to understand that the twofold basic task of the leading bodies of the Communist Party is to know conditions and to master policy. The former means knowing the world, and the latter changing the world. We should get our comrades to understand that without investigation there is no right to speak, and that bombastic twaddle and a mere list of phenomena in 1, 2, 3, 4 order are of no use. Take propaganda work, for instance. If we do not know the situation with regard to the propaganda of our enemies, our friends, and ourselves, we shall be unable to decide on a correct propaganda policy. In the work of any department, it is necessary to know the situation first, and only then can the work be well handled. The fundamental link in changing the party style of work is to carry out plans for investigation and study throughout the party. 2. As for China's history in the last 100 years, we should assemble qualified persons to study it, in cooperation with a proper division of labor, and so overcome the present disorganized state of affairs. First, it is necessary to make analytical studies in the several fields of economic history, political history, military history, and cultural history, and only then will it be possible to make synthetical studies. 3. As for education of cadres, whether at work or in schools for cadres, a policy should be established of focusing such education on the study of the practical problems of the Chinese Revolution, and using the basic principles of Marxism-Leninism as the guide, and the method of studying Marxism-Leninism, statically and in isolation, should be discarded. Moreover, in studying Marxism-Leninism, we should use the history of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union Bolshevik short course as the principal material. It is the best synthesis and summing up of the world communist movement of the past 100 years, a model of the integration of theory and practice, and so far the only comprehensive model in the whole world. When we see how Lenin and Stalin integrated the universal truth of Marxism with the concrete practice of the Soviet Revolution, and thereby developed Marxism, we shall know how we should work in China. We have made many detours, but error is often the precursor of what is correct. I am confident that in the context of the Chinese Revolution and the World Revolution, which is so intensely alive and so richly varied, this reform of our study will certainly yield good results. Rectify the party style of work. February 1st, 1942. Footnote. This speech was delivered by Mao Zedong at the opening of the party school of the Central Committee of the Communist Party of China. End footnote. The party school opens today, and I wish it every success. I would like to say something about the problem of our party style of work. Why must there be a revolutionary party? There must be a revolutionary party because the world contains enemies who oppress the people, and the people want to throw off enemy oppression. In the era of capitalism and imperialism, just such a revolutionary party as the Communist Party is needed. Without such a party, it is simply impossible for the people to throw off enemy oppression. We are communists, we want to lead the people in overthrowing the enemy, and so we must keep our ranks in good order. We must march in step, our troops must be picked troops, and our weapons good weapons. Without these conditions, the enemy cannot be overthrown. What is the problem now facing our party? The general line of the party is correct and presents no problem, and the party's work has been fruitful. The party has several 100,000 members who are leading the people in extremely hard and bitter struggles against the enemy. This is plain to everybody and beyond all doubt. Then is there or is there not any problem still facing our party? I say there is, and in a certain sense, the problem is quite serious. What is the problem? It is the fact that there is something in the minds of a number of our comrades which strikes one as not quite right, not quite proper. In other words, there is still something wrong with our style of study, with our style in the party's internal and external relations, and with our style of writing. By something wrong with this style of study, we mean the malady of subjectivism. By something wrong with our style in party relations, we mean the malady of sectarianism. By something wrong with the style of writing, we mean the malady of stereotyped party writing. Footnote. Stereotyped writing, or the eight-legged essay, was a special form of essay prescribed in the imperial examinations under China's feudal dynasties from the 15th to the 19th centuries. It consisted in juggling words, concentrated only on form, and was devoid of content. Structurally, the main had to have two legs, i.e., two antithetical paragraphs, hence the name eight-legged essay. The eight-legged essay became a byword in China, denoting stereotyped formalism and triteness. Thus, stereotyped party writing characterized the writings of certain people in the revolutionary ranks who piled up revolutionary phrases and terms higgledy-piggledy instead of analyzing the facts. Like the eight-legged essay, their writings were nothing but verbiage. End footnote. All these are wrong. They are ill winds, but they are not like the wintry north winds that sweep across the whole sky. Subjectivism, sectarianism, and stereotyped party writing are no longer the dominant styles, but merely gusts of contrary wind, ill winds from the air-raid tunnels. It is bad, however, that such winds should still be blowing in the party. We must seal off the passages that produce them. Our whole party should undertake the job of sealing off these passages, and so should the party school. These three ill winds, subjectivism, sectarianism, and stereotyped party writing, have their historical origins. Although no longer dominant in the whole party, they still constantly create trouble and assail us. Therefore, it is necessary to resist them, to study, analyze, and elucidate them. Fight subjectivism in order to rectify the style of study, fight sectarianism in order to rectify the style in party relations, and fight party stereotypes in order to rectify the style of writing, such is the task before us. To accomplish the task of overthrowing the enemy, we must accomplish the task of rectifying these styles within the party. The style of study and the style of writing are also the party style of work. Once our party's style of work is put completely right, the people all over the country will learn from our example. Those outside the party who have the same kind of bad style will, if they are good and honest people, learn from our example and correct their mistakes, and thus the whole nation will be influenced. So long as our communist ranks are in good order and march in step, so long as our troops are picked troops and our weapons are good weapons, any enemy, however powerful, can be overthrown. Let me speak now about subjectivism. Subjectivism is an improper style of study. It is opposed to Marxism-Leninism and is incompatible with the Communist Party. What we want is the Marxist-Leninist style of study. What we call style of study means not just style of study in the schools, but in the whole party. It is a question of the method of thinking of comrades in our leading bodies, of all cadres and party members, a question of our attitude towards Marxism-Leninism, of the attitude of all party comrades in their work. As such, it is a question of extraordinary, indeed of primary importance. Certain muddled ideas find currency among many people. There are, for instance, muddled ideas about what is a theorist, what is an intellectual, and what is meant by linking theory and practice. Let us first ask, is the theoretical level of our party high or low? Recently, more Marxist-Leninist works have been translated and more people have been reading them. This is a very good thing. But can we therefore say that the theoretical level of our party has been greatly raised? True, the level is now somewhat higher than before, but our theoretical front is very much out of harmony with the rich content of the Chinese revolutionary movement, and a comparison of the two shows that the theoretical side is lagging far behind. Generally speaking, our theory cannot as yet keep pace with our revolutionary practice, let alone lead the way as it should. We have not yet raised our rich and varied practice to the proper theoretical plane. We have not yet examined all the problems of revolutionary practice, or even the important ones, and raised them to a theoretical plane. Just think how many of us have created theories worthy of the name of China's economics, politics, military affairs, or culture, theories which can be regarded as scientific and comprehensive, and not crude and sketchy. Especially in the field of economic theory, Chinese capitalism has had a century of development since the Opium War, and yet not a single theoretical work has been produced which accords with the realities of China's economic development and is genuinely scientific. Can we say that in the study of China's economic problems, for instance, that the theoretical level is already high? Can we say that our party already has economic theorists worthy of the name? Certainly not. We have read a great many Marxist-Leninist books, but can we claim then that we have theorists? We cannot. For Marxism-Leninism is the theory created by Marx, Engels, Lenin, and Stalin on the basis of practice, their general conclusions drawn from historical and revolutionary reality. If we merely read their works but do not proceed to study the realities of China's history and revolution in the light of their theory, or do not make any effort to think through China's revolutionary practice carefully in terms of theory, we should not be so presumptuous as to call ourselves Marxist theorists. Our achievements on the theoretical front will be very poor indeed if, as members of the Communist Party of China, we close our eyes to China's problems and can only memorize isolated conclusions or principles from Marxist writings. If all a person can do is to commit Marxist economics or philosophy to memory, reciting glibly from chapter 1 to chapter 10, but is utterly unable to apply them, can he be considered a Marxist theorist?
No.
No, he cannot. What kind of theorist do we want? We want theorists who can, in accordance with the Marxist-Leninist stand,
Need theorists with the
method,
rings.
correctly interpret the practical problems arising in the course of history and revolution, and give scientific explanations and theoretical elucidations of Chinese economic, political, military, cultural, and other problems. Such are the theorists we want. To be a theorist of this kind, a person must have a true grasp of the essence of Marxism-Leninism, of the Marxist-Leninist stand, viewpoint, and method.
The name of the city comes from that shitty Bill Maher segment from last month where he basically ranted and raved about Palestinian solidarity protesters and said that we would never survive an Intifadaville. I don't know. Intifadaville looks pretty dope. It looks a lot better than, say,
of our party has now made a decision calling upon our
Detroit, which is not Intifadaville.
Marxist-Leninist stand, viewpoint, and method in the serious study of China's history and of China's economics,
Dearborn is
politics,
Intifadaville, though.
affairs, and culture, and to analyze every problem
Never been to
concretely on
Dearborn.
the basis of
Should
detailed
go there.
material, and then draw theoretical conclusions.
It's like
This is
a
the
very chill
responsibility on
place.
my shoulder. Our comrades in the party school should not regard Marxist theory as lifeless dogma. It is necessary to master Marxist theory and apply it, master it for the sole purpose of applying it. If you can apply the Marxist-Leninist viewpoint in elucidating one or two practical problems, you should be commended and credited with some achievement. On this question of the intellectuals, the Central Committee of the party made the decision over 2 years ago that we should win over the great number of intellectuals and, insofar as they are revolutionary and willing to take part in the resistance to Japan, welcome them one and all. Footnote. This was the decision on recruiting intellectuals adopted by the Central Committee of the Communist Party of China in December 1939, which is printed under the article Recruit Large Numbers of Intellectuals in the Selected Works of Mao, Volume 2, Works of Maoism. End footnote. It is entirely right for us to esteem intellectuals, for without revolutionary intellectuals, the revolution cannot triumph. But we all know there are many intellectuals who fancy themselves very learned and assume airs of erudition without realizing that such airs are bad and harmful and hinder their own progress. They ought to be aware of the truth that actually many so-called intellectuals are, relatively speaking, most ignorant, and the workers and peasants sometimes know more than they do. Here some will say, you are turning things upside down and talking nonsense. But comrades, don't get excited, there is some sense in what I'm saying. What is knowledge? Ever since class society came into being, the world has had only two kinds of knowledge. Knowledge of the struggle for production and knowledge of the class struggle. Natural science and social science are the crystallization of these two kinds of knowledge, and philosophy is the generalization and summation of the knowledge of nature and the knowledge of society. Is there any other kind of knowledge? No. Now let us take a look at certain students, those brought up in schools that are completely cut off from the practical activities of society. What about them? A person goes from a primary school of this kind all the way through to a university of the same kind, graduates, and is reckoned to have a stock of learning. But all he has is book learning. He has not yet taken part in any practical activities or applied what he has learned to any field of life. Can such a person be regarded as a completely developed intellectual? Hardly so, in my opinion, because his knowledge is still incomplete. What then is relatively complete knowledge? All relatively complete knowledge is formed in two stages. The first stage is perceptual knowledge, the second is rational knowledge, the latter being the development of the former to a higher stage. What sort of knowledge is the student's book learning? Even supposing all their knowledge is truth, it is still not knowledge acquired through their own personal experience, but consists of theories set down by their predecessors in summarizing experience of the struggle for production and of the class struggle. It is entirely necessary that students should acquire this kind of knowledge, but it must be understood that as far as they are concerned, such knowledge is in a sense still one-sided, something that has been verified by others but not yet by themselves. What is most important is to be good at applying this knowledge in life and in practice. Therefore, I advise those who only have book learning, but as yet no contact with reality, and also those with little practical experience, to realize their own shortcomings and become a little more modest. How can those who have only book learning be turned into intellectuals in the true sense? The only way is to get them to take part in practical work and become practical workers, to get those
I've finally broken myself from your LARP.
Problems. In this way, our aim can be attained. What I have said will probably make some people angry. They will say, according to your explanation, even Marx would not be regarded as an intellectual. I say they are wrong. Marx took part in the practice of the revolutionary movement and also created revolutionary theory. Beginning with the commodity, the simplest element of capitalism, he made a thorough study of the economic structure of capitalist society. Millions of people saw and handled commodities every day, but were so used to them that they took no notice. Marx alone studied commodities scientifically. He carried out a tremendous work of research into their actual development and derived a thoroughly scientific theory from what existed universally. He studied nature, history, and proletarian revolution, and created dialectical materialism, historical materialism, and the theory of proletarian revolution. Thus, Marx became a most completely developed intellectual.
Oh, what are we listening to?
Wisdom. He
Sorry.
was fundamentally different from those book learning. Marx undertook
this is Writings on Organization and Mass Line from Foreign Languages Press.
And then
it's very good.
Conclusions by testing them in practical struggles. This is what we call theoretical work. Our party needs a large.
I'm also going to see if I can get a Comrade Arun from last night on to talk about his people's struggle and the recent discovery of a horrible mass grave that I talked about last night. Maybe a little armor later. I don't know. Y'all tired of watching me play that?
There is only one kind of true theory in
I don't want to burn it out.
That is drawn from objective reality.
I can keep my failures in military affairs to myself from now on if you all want.
Stalin said that theory becomes aimless when it is not connected with practice.
No, you will call my name soon enough.
Theory is useless and false and should be discarded.
BRG, get in the fight. Come here, you coward.
Marxism-Leninism is the most correct, scientific, and revolutionary truth born out of and verified by objective reality. But many
it's not bad enough you got me addicted to it. Now you've damn near got the entire fucking caucus addicted to it, bro.
As well as their comrades. On the other hand, our comrades who are engaged in practical work.
Yes, I'm sure that I will be in withdrawal soon enough.
True, these people are often rich in experience, which is very valuable, but it is very dangerous if they rest.
No, I have to go back to my first love, city builders. Ooh, look at all that air pollution.
And partial, and that they lack rational and comprehensive knowledge. In other words, they lack theory in their knowledge.
I guess this is where all the rich party cadres live, and this is where all the proles live.
Without comparatively complete knowledge, it is impossible to do revolutionary work well. Thus, there are two kinds of incomplete knowledge. One is ready-made knowledge found in books, and the other is knowledge that is mostly perceptual and partial. Both are one-sided. Only an integration of the two can yield knowledge that is sound and relatively complete.
It is a beautiful game.
In order to study theory, however, our cadres of working class and peasant origin must first acquire an elementary education. Without it, they cannot learn Marxist-Leninist theory.
Learn to read, you have to do the reading.
At any time. In my childhood, I never attended a Marxist-Leninist school and was taught only such things as, the master said, how pleasant it is to learn and constantly review what one has learned.
11,000 miserable fuckers sucking down air pollution.
Because from it, I
think some parks will help.
Nowadays, we no longer study the Confucian classics, but such new subjects as modern Chinese, history, geography, and elementary natural science, which, once learned, are useful everywhere. The Central Committee of our party now emphatically requires that our cadres of working class and peasant origin should obtain an elementary education, because they then can take up any branch of study, politics, military science, or economics. Otherwise, for all their rich experience, they will never be able to study theory. It follows that to combat subjectivism, we must enable people of each of these two types to develop in whichever direction they are deficient and to merge with the other type. Those with book learning must develop in the direction of practice. It is only in this way that they will stop being content with books and avoid committing dogmatist errors. Those experienced in work must take up the study of theory and must read seriously. Only then will they be able to systematize and synthesize their experience and raise it to the level of theory. Only then will they not mistake their partial experience for universal truth and not commit empiricist
All
errors.
theory is basically other people's
Dogmatism
fuck-ups and
empiricism alike are
successes.
subjectivism, each originating from an opposite pole.
That's why I look down on European
Hence, there are two
philosophers.
kinds
Y'all
of
have never had
subjectivism in
any
our
fucking
party,
practice. How the fuck are
dogmatism
you a
and
philosopher?
empiricism.
Where does
Each sees
philosophy
only a
come
part
from?
and not the whole. If people are not
I'm
on
not
guard,
from some
do not realize that
chain-smoking,
such one-sidedness is a shortcoming, do
sexual
not strive to
degenerate
overcome it, they are liable to go astray.
sitting in a room
However, one of the two
yapping.
kinds of subjectivism, dogmatism is still the greater danger in our party. For dogmatists can easily assume
And
that
like
Marxist
when I
guys
call
that
somebody
profit from capturing
a sexual
servitors and
degenerate, I say
cadres
this
of
as a
working class
libertine
and peasant
myself.
origin,
Like some of those
cannot
French
easily
fuckers
see
were
through,
like
and
royally
can also
fucked.
bluff and ensnare the naive youth.
Yeah.
If we overcome dogmatism, cadres with book learning will readily join with those who have experience and will take to the study of practical things, and then many good cadres who integrate theory with experience, as well as some real theorists, will emerge. If we overcome dogmatism, the comrades with practical experience will have good teachers to help them
I
raise
feel
their
like fucking
experience
these
to the level
trains.
of theory and so avoid empiricist errors. Besides muddled ideas about the theorist and the intellectual, there is a muddled idea
Time
among
to
many comrades
expand.
about linking theory and practice, a phrase they have on their lips every day.
Yeah, I could do another
They
long.
talk constantly about linking, but actually they mean separating, because they make no effort at linking. How is Marxist-Leninist theory to be linked with the practice
Yeah,
of the
my
Chinese
budget can
Revolution?
carry it.
So is Marxism-Leninism to the Chinese Revolution.
You want to shoot
Some
an arrow at
comrades are shooting
Marxism-Leninism?
without a target, shooting at random, and such people are liable to harm the revolution. Others merely stroke the arrow fondly, exclaiming, "What a fine arrow, what a fine arrow," but never want to shoot it.
Yeah,
These
comrade,
people
stop
are only
stroking your
connoisseurs
arrow.
of curios and have virtually nothing
It's
to do with
gross.
the revolution. An arrow of Marxism-Leninism must be used to shoot at the target of the Chinese Revolution.
Stop playing with your
Unless
fucking
the
arrows,
target is clear,
comrades.
the theoretical level of
It's
our party
nasty.
can never be raised, and the Chinese Revolution can never be victorious. Our comrades must
I
understand
like
that we study
buried power
Marxism-Leninism not for
lines.
display, nor because there is any mystery about it, but solely because it is the science that leads the revolutionary cause of the proletariat to victory. Even now, there are not a few people who still regard random quotations from Marxist-Leninist works as a ready-made panacea which, once acquired, can easily cure all maladies.
Like quotations
These
from
people
Mao?
show childish ignorance, and we should enlighten them. It is precisely such ignorant people who take Marxism-Leninism as a religious dogma. To them we should say bluntly, your dogma is worthless. Marx, Engels, Lenin, and Stalin have repeatedly stated that our theory is not a dogma, but a guide to action. But such people prefer to forget this statement, which is of the greatest, indeed the utmost importance. Chinese communists can be regarded as linking theory with practice only when they become good at applying the Marxist-Leninist stand, viewpoint, and method in the teachings of Lenin and Stalin.
Go through and
concerning the
rename all
Chinese
these
Revolution,
districts
and when,
later.
furthermore, through serious research into the realities of China's history and revolution,
As
they
the
do
default
create
names are
theoretical
trash. Who the
work
fuck
to
is
meet
Kent?
Chinese
What is
needs and
Kent
its
Square?
fears.
We're not brash.
Merely talking about linking theory and practice without actually doing anything about it is of no use, even if one goes on talking for 100 years. To oppose the subjectivist, one-sided approach to problems, we must demolish dogmatist subjectiveness and one-sidedness. So much for today about combating subjectivism in order to rectify the style of study throughout the party. Let me now speak about the question of sectarianism. Having been steeled for 20 years,
My
our party
favorite
is no longer
activity.
dominated by sectarianism. Remnants of sectarianism, however, are still found both in the party's internal relations and in its external relations. Sectarian tendencies and internal relations lead to exclusiveness towards comrades inside the party and hinder inter-party unity and solidarity, while sectarian tendencies and external relations lead to exclusiveness towards people outside the party and hinder the party in its task of uniting the whole people. Only by uprooting this evil in both of its aspects can the party advance unimpeded in its great task of achieving unity among all party comrades and among all people of our country. What are the remnants of inter-party sectarianism? They are mainly as follows. First, the assertion of independence. Some comrades see only the interests of the part and not the whole. They always put undue stress on that part of the work for which they themselves are responsible, and always wish to subordinate the interests of the whole to the interests of their own part. They do not understand the party system of democratic centralism. They do not realize that the Communist Party not only needs democracy, but needs centralization even more. They forget the system of democratic centralism in which the minority is subordinate to the majority, the lower level to the higher level, the part to the whole, and the entire membership to the Central Committee. Zhang Gutao asserted his independence of the Central Committee of the party and as a result asserted himself into betraying the party and became a Guomindang agent.
Ooh.
Footnote. Zhang Gutao was a renegade from the Chinese Revolution. In early life, speculating on the revolution, he joined the Communist Party. In the party, he made many mistakes, resulting in serious crimes.
Boo.
The most notorious of these was his opposition in 1935 to the Red Army's northward march and his defeatism and liquidationism in advocating withdrawal by the Red Army to the minority nationality areas on the Sichuan-Zhejiang borders. He openly carried out traitorous activities against the party in the Central Committee, established his own bogus Central Committee, disrupted the unity of the party and the Red Army, and caused heavy losses to the Fourth Front Army. But through the patient education by Mao Zedong and the Central Committee, the Fourth Front Army and its numerous cadres soon returned to the correct leadership of the Central Committee of the party and played a glorious role in subsequent struggles. Zhang Guotao, however, proved incorrigible, and in the spring of 1938 he slipped out of the Sanji, Gansu, Ningxia border region and joined the Guomindang secret police. End footnote. Although the sectarianism we are now discussing is not of this extremely serious kind, it must still be guarded against, and we must do away completely with all manifestations of disunity. We should encourage comrades to take the interests of the whole into account. Every party member, every branch of work, every statement, and every action must proceed from the interests of the whole party. It is absolutely impermissible to violate this principle. Those who assert this kind of independence are usually wedded to the doctrine of me first, and are generally wrong on the question of the relationship between the individual and the party. Although in words they profess respect for the party, in practice they put themselves first and the party second. What are these people after? They are after fame and position and want to be in the limelight. Whenever they are put in charge of a branch of work, they assert their independence. With this aim, they draw some people in, push others out, and resort to boasting, flattery, and touting among the comrades. Thus,
I like boasting and flattery. I like being boasted and flattered about.
It is their dishonesty that causes them to come to grief. I believe we should do things honestly, for without an honest attitude, it is absolutely impossible to accomplish anything in this world. Which are the honest people? Marx, Engels, Lenin, and Stalin are honest. Men of science are honest. Which are the dishonest people? Trotsky, Bukharin, Chen Jiahui, and Zhang Gutao are extremely dishonest, and those who assert independence out of personal or sectional interest are dishonest too. All sly people, all those who do not have a scientific attitude in their work, fancy themselves resourceful and clever, but in fact they are most stupid and will come to no good. Students in our party school must pay attention to this problem. We must build a centralized, unified party and make a clean sweep of all unprincipled factional struggles. We must combat individualism and sectarianism.
That's a lot of shit water.
Party to march in step and fight for one common goal. Cadres from the outside and those from the locality must unite and combat sectarian tendencies. Very careful attention must be given to the relations between outside and local cadres because many anti-Japanese base areas were established only after the arrival of the 8th Route Army, and much of the local work developed only after the arrival of outside cadres. Our comrades must understand that in these conditions, it is possible for our base areas to be consolidated, and for our party to take root there only when the two kinds of cadres unite as one, and when a large number of local cadres develop and are promoted. Otherwise, it is impossible. Both the outside and the local cadres have their strong and weak points, and to make any progress, they must overcome their own weak points by learning from each other's strong points. The outside cadres are generally not up to the local cadres, in familiarity with local conditions and links with the masses.
Mao says transplants suck.
For instance, although I have been in northern Sanji for 5 or 6 years, I am far behind the local comrades in understanding local conditions and in links with the people here. Our comrades going to the anti-Japanese base areas in Sanji, Hebei, Shandong, and other provinces must pay attention.
He said dong.
Moreover, even within the same base area, owing to the fact that some districts develop earlier and others later, there is a difference between the local cadres of a district and those from outside it. cadres who come from a more developed to a less developed district are also outside cadres in relation to that locality, and they too should pay great attention to fostering and helping local cadres. Generally speaking, in places where outside cadres are in charge, it is they who should bear the main responsibility if their relations with the local cadres are not good. And the chief comrades in charge should bear greater responsibility. The attention paid to this problem in some places is still very inadequate. Some people look down on the local cadres and ridicule them, saying, "What do these locals know? Clodhoppers." Such people utterly fail to understand the importance of local cadres. They know neither the latter's strong points nor their own weaknesses and adopt an incorrect sectarian attitude. All outside cadres must cherish the local cadres and give them constant help, and must not be permitted to ridicule or attack them. Of course, the local cadres, on their part, must learn from the strong points of the outside cadres and rid themselves of inappropriate, narrow views, so that they and the outside cadres become as one, with no distinction between them and us, and thus avoid sectarian tendencies. The same applies to the relationship between cadres in army service and other cadres working in the locality. They must be completely united and must oppose sectarian tendencies. The army cadres must help the local cadres and vice versa. If there is friction between them, each should make allowance for the other and carry out proper self-criticism. Generally speaking, in places where army cadres are actually in positions of leadership, it is they who should bear the main responsibility if their relations with the local cadres are not good. Only when the army cadres understand their own responsibility and are modest in their attitude towards the local cadres can the conditions be created for the smooth progress of our war effort and our work of construction in the base areas. The same applies to the relationship among different army units, different localities, and different departments. We must oppose the tendency towards selfish departmentalism, by which the interests of one's own unit are looked after to the exclusion of those of others. Whoever is indifferent to the difficulties of others, refuses to transfer cadres to other units on requests, or releases only the inferior ones, using the neighbor's field as an outlet for his overflow, and does not give the slightest consideration to other departments, localities, or people. Such a person is a selfish departmentalist who has entirely lost the spirit of communism. Lack of consideration for the whole and complete indifference to other departments, localities, and people are characteristics of a selfish departmentalist. We must intensify our efforts to educate such persons and to make them understand that selfish departmentalism is a sectarian tendency that will become very dangerous if allowed to develop. Another problem is the relationship between old and new cadres. Since the beginning of the War of Resistance, our party has grown enormously, and a large number of new cadres have emerged. That is a very good thing. In his report to the 18th Congress of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union, Comrade Stalin said, quote, "There are never enough old cadres, there are far less than required, and they are already partly going out of commission owing to the operation of the laws of nature," unquote. Here he was discussing the cadre situation and not only the laws of nature. If our party does not have a great many new cadres working in unity and cooperation with the old cadres, our cause will come to a stop. All old cadres, therefore, should welcome the new ones with the utmost enthusiasm and show them the warmest solicitude. True, new cadres have their shortcomings. They have not been long in the revolution and lack experience, and unavoidably some have brought with them vestiges of the unwholesome ideology of the old society, remnants of the ideology of petty bourgeois individualism. But such shortcomings can be gradually eliminated through education and tempering in the revolution. The strong point of the new cadres, as Stalin has said, is that they are acutely sensitive to what is new and are therefore enthusiastic and active to a high degree. The very
Are you
qualities which
guys
some of the old
thirsty? You
cadres
want some
lack.
water?
Cadres, new and old, should respect each other,
Fucking
learn
people
from each other,
always
and overcome
need
their own
something.
shortcomings
I'm
by learning from each
thirsty.
other's
I'm
strong
hungry.
points, so as to unite as one in the common cause
Fucking
and guard against
masses.
sectarian tendencies. Generally speaking, in places where the old cadres are mainly in charge, it is they who should bear the chief responsibility if relations with the new cadres are not good. All the above,
Drink up all the fucking groundwater. You're really going to be thirsty.
The individual and the party, relations between outside and local cadres, relations between army cadres and other cadres working in the locality, relations between this and that army unit, between this and that locality, between this and that department, and relations between old and new cadres, are relations within the party. In all these relations, it is necessary to enhance the spirit of communism and guard against sectarian tendencies, so that the ranks of our party will be in good order, march in step, and therefore fight well. This is a very important problem, which we must solve thoroughly in rectifying the party style of work. Sectarianism is an expression of subjectivism in organizational relations. If we want to get rid of subjectivism and promote the Marxist-Leninist spirit of seeking truth from facts, We must sweep the remnants of sectarianism out of the party and proceed from the principle that the party's interests are above personal or sectional interests so that the party can attain complete solidarity and unity. The remnants of sectarianism must be eliminated from the party's external as well as its internal relations. The reason is this: we cannot defeat the enemy by merely uniting the comrades throughout the party. We can defeat the enemy only by uniting the people throughout the country.
Yummy,
For 20
yummy
years, the
chemicals.
Communist Party of China has done great and arduous work in the cause of uniting the people of the whole country. And the achievements in this work since the outbreak of the War of Resistance are even greater than in the past. This does not mean, however, that all our comrades already have a correct style in dealing with the masses and are free from sectarian tendencies. No, in fact, sectarian
Built a
tendencies still
steakhouse
exist
for the
among
street
enemy
Lorraites.
comrades, and in some cases to a very serious
Burned
degree.
bean. Ooh.
Many of our comrades tend to be overbearing in their relations with non-party people, look down upon them, despise or refuse to respect them, or appreciate their strong points. This is indeed a sectarian tendency.
Intifadaville looks like a pretty
After
nice
reading
place to
a few
live,
books
if I
books,
must say
such
so
comrades
myself.
become more arrogant instead of more modest, and invariably
Nice
dismiss
little blend
others as
of
no good,
European and
without
American and
realizing that, in
Mediterranean
fact, their own
architecture.
knowledge is only half-baked. Our comrades must realize the truth that the Communist Party members are at all times a minority as compared with the non-party people. Supposing 1 out of every 100 persons were a communist, then there would be 4,500,000 communists among China's population of 450 million. Yet, even if our membership reached this huge figure, communists would still form only 1% of the whole population, while 99% would be non-party people. What reason can we have then for not cooperating with non-party people? As regards all those who wish to cooperate with us or might cooperate with
We've had
us,
a
we
mass
have only the
transit,
duty of cooperating
and
and
everybody
absolutely
just
no
sort of
right to
driving
shut them
around.
out. But some party members do not understand this and look down upon or even shut out those who wish to cooperate with us. There are no grounds whatsoever for doing so. Have Marx, Engels, Lenin, and Stalin given us any grounds? They have not. On the contrary, they have always earnestly enjoined us to form close ties with the masses and not divorce ourselves from them. Or has the Central Committee of the Communist Party of China given us any grounds? No, among all its resolutions there is not a single one that says we may divorce ourselves from the masses and so isolate ourselves. On the contrary, the Central Committee has always told us to form
I'll be
close
back
ties
around
with the
5.
masses